asked to accept this, and then I would ask you to accept this, and then just, if you want, especially the two speakers, turn on your camera once again. We kindly ask you to mute your microphone if you are not speaking. And of course, if you have any questions, please write them in the chat. We will also have a discussion afterwards, but nevertheless, even when the discussion, the presentations are already going on, you are mostly welcome to put your questions, remarks already in the chat. And last but not least, the timetable for today. I'm doing the, I'm the facilitator. I do the first welcome remarks, then I hand over to Simon, our head of component, for the welcome words and the opening remarks. And then altogether, we would like to welcome our two speakers, Dr. Kristy Leissle and Simran Bindra from the African Cocoa Marketplace, Kristy, and the CEO, Simran, from the Kokoa Kamili Ltd company in Tanzania. And of course, we have still 30 minutes time for discussion afterwards. And yeah, I'm looking forward to a very fruitful meeting today. And let me now stop share my screen. And I would like to hand over to our head of component, Simon Striegel, please.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I hope you can all hear me. I'm really keen to see so many familiar names and faces, also some new ones joining us for the session today. I do not want to keep you all too long, as I know there are two very exciting expert presentations waiting for us. But let me warmly welcome you all, especially also our private sector partners in the cocoa sector that are implementing projects towards strengthening climate resilience and building stronger market linkages. We are really delighted to see you all here today. And on behalf of GIZ's Agri-Business Facility for Africa, in short ABF, and our head of project, Ms. Lynn Feldkötter, it is my pleasure really to open this expert talk focusing on the cocoa value chain. So I think we have many experts here among us today, but yeah, I think the cocoa value chain is of really strategic importance, both for serving mainstream and niche markets for the African continent, for the Caribbean. Also, there are 5.5 million producers worldwide, most of them small scale, and the demand for cocoa-based products and chocolate is growing steadily. So clearly, there is a tremendous opportunity if some structural challenges, trade barriers, certification challenges can be overcome. There's also climatic stress and high price volatility that many value chain actors are confronted with. And this is really the reason why the cocoa sector is one of the 3 priority value chains that ABF is focusing on. So ABF is co-funded by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development and the European Union under the Joint Action Business Support Facility for Climate Resilient Value Chain. And the project mobilizes private sector investment and prepares agribusiness for climate resilience and sustainable growth. And the key instrument in this effort is a dedicated competitive matching grant fund, through which we support a total of 65 private sector-led consortia in testing, scaling impactful agribusiness solutions. And another priority for us at ABF is to facilitate business-to-business partnerships that are promoting vertical market linkages. And today, I'm quite happy that we will hear from one out of the 65 MGF partners, specifically on how they have succeeded in entering the cocoa EU market. I'd like to say that this is also not a once-off exercise here today. This expert talk forms part of a broader series of webinars that we continuously organize to ensure that shared knowledge strengthens the entire value chain. And we believe that by bringing together relevant organizations, we can help build partnerships and anchor innovation sustainably beyond the project's 10 years. And market access is a strategic priority for us as a project. Earlier this year, ABF accompanied a delegation of 10 cocoa producing companies from numerous countries: the Dominican Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Tanzania, Togo, Uganda. So quite a diverse group to join the 2026 edition of the International Sweets and Snacks Fair in Cologne. And there, the companies had the chance to exhibit their products. They were match-made with suitable European cocoa buyers and coached on how to even better pitch their companies and products. And I can say with conviction that this was very valuable, quite a learning opportunities, and for many of the companies also the first time to interact directly with European buyers at a trade fair. And we really had deep discussions around market access, talking about Bindra certification, traceability, trust building, all with the goal to create durable vertical market linkages and partnerships. And I think today we continue this learning journey on the topic of EU market access. And the session will not only highlight what works or what has worked for some players in this space, but hopefully also inspire some additional collaboration between producers and buyers of high quality cocoa or cocoa-based products. I would really like to thank my two ABF colleagues, Lou Lefort and especially Stefan Pletziger, for organizing this expert talk today, and also extend my deep appreciation and thank our two experts today, both of which truly deserve to be on the stage. I know that for sure. So we have with us today Kristy Leissle, a thought leader in the cocoa and chocolate industry and founder and CEO of the African Cocoa Marketplace, which is a online platform that directly connects Africa's cocoa sellers with international buyers. And we have with us Simran Bindra, director of Kokoa Kamili, operating in the heart of Tanzania and working with quite a few out of the 3.5 million cocoa producers in Africa. Kokoa Kamili is one of the most innovative and thriving cocoa businesses in East Africa, and it's known for its very strong quality profile. And I can also confirm as a consumer that Kokoa Kamili's beans end up in very excellent chocolate bars on the shelves of supermarkets here in Germany and elsewhere. So we are really grateful to have you two with us here today. Money moves, knowledge stays. So funding cycles come to a close, strengthened skills, institutional partnerships are what remains. So that's our deep belief and guides us in the ABF. And today, we look forward, dear Simran, dear Kristy, to gain a small share of your knowledge. I wish us all fruitful discussions. And back to you, Stefan. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Simon, for this very good welcome remarks and opening words. I think there's nothing to add to what Simon has already said. Only one advice to those people who came late: please have a look in the chat. There are all information concerning the French and Spanish translation, so that you can follow up everything in Spanish and French if you want. Simran, you have a remark, please.
Just quickly, I've had 2 or 3 different people WhatsApp me saying that they've been in the waiting room for some time. I don't see them in the waiting room, but I just wanted to flag that.
Yeah, but basically when people just ask for permission to enter, we directly grant this. So normally it's only really a question of very few seconds. But basically all people are now in the call. Yeah. All right. Anyway, so but Simon gave a good introduction to our speakers, so let me directly hand over to Kristy. And before I do that, Simran, maybe you can just write them a short WhatsApp that they ask or they want to rejoin, and they should ask again for permission. Kristy, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Stefan, Simon, for that very kind introduction. I really appreciate it, and it is a great pleasure to be here today with you all. So I've just started my screen share. Is it visible? Okay, I see a thumbs up, so I'm going to go for it. So yeah, thanks very much. Really a pleasure to be here with you all today. I'm Dr. Kristy Leissle, founder and CEO of African Cocoa Marketplace, and we are talking today on the theme of buyer decisions, cocoa buyer decisions from a European perspective. And I want to start by acknowledging that our audience very likely includes sellers of cocoa, buyers of cocoa, as well as ecosystem supporters. And I'll have something to say to all of those groups during my presentation today. So this is a buyer perspective conversation. So for the next hour or so, we're not thinking really so much about what sellers want to say, but rather what buyers need to see and hear before they can act to take a trade initiative. So that will be my focus. So let's talk about buyer decision-making around cocoa. So when a buyer is thinking about making a purchase, that decision is very rarely based only on the cocoa itself. Now, many cocoa sellers will talk about what they have. They will talk about the cocoa that they have quite naturally, maybe their origin story, community impact, if that's important to their model, any certifications they might have. And it's really important to understand that buyers are listening to all of that through their own specific filter. So the way that I have noticed buyers are listening to sellers, first they're asking the question, can I find you? Can I find you as a cocoa seller? And buyers really have a need to go beyond their existing networks, their usual intermediaries that they work with, origins that they've worked with in the past. They need to get beyond that to find most of the cocoa sellers in the world. And that's already a challenge at the start. So the buyer's first asking, can I find this seller? Is that easy or is that hard? Then, of course, they're asking themselves, can I trust the information that the seller is sharing? If the seller says, I have this much cocoa and it's this type of quality and it has this certifications, the buyer's necessarily asking themselves, is there evidence to support those claims? And can I trust those claims? And then finally, the buyer's really thinking, can I engage safely? And what I mean by safely is without adding any additional operational risk or compliance risk. The seller may look very promising, but the buyer still needs a pathway to obtain samples, to sign contracts, to manage the trade logistics. So these are the kinds of things that the buyer's thinking about when they're engaging in a new trade relationship. I'm not saying this because I think the buyers are always right. That's not the case at all. What I am saying is that sellers can have much more influence on the process of engaging with a buyer when they understand how buyers make their sourcing decisions. So these are three of the kind of buckets of questions that buyers are thinking about. So, buyer decision framework. I have seen 4 areas where buyers either gain confidence in the seller or lose confidence in the seller. One, obviously, foundational commercial fit. Does the seller have the product I'm looking for to the volume that I need at the price that I'm willing to pay? Then they are thinking about operational capacity. Does the seller have the ability to manage the cocoa itself through post-harvest, through quality control, but also does the seller have the capacity to handle the relationship that we're building in this trade? Evidence and compliance. We all know that this has been increasingly important for buyers, particularly in Europe. We're all aware that the European Union deforestation regulation has really dramatically increased the need for traceability in cocoa, and it's really heightened the regulatory risk around procuring cocoa. So buyers are either going to be confident about that when they're sourcing from a new seller, or they're not going to be confident about that. And a lot of that depends on how the seller is communicating. And finally, buyers are thinking about the relationship pathway. Not every buyer can purchase directly from a seller, and not every seller can export directly. So if you are in the audience today as a seller, I want you to see that your readiness for trade, how you're going to get the cocoa from point A to point B, it's a practical matter. You need to have those logistics in place, or the awareness of how to action on logistics, but you also need to be able to show that to the buyer. So now we've seen a little bit about what the buyer's thinking when they're considering new trades, but what can get in the way of that? I think this is a really important question to ask. Where are the frictions? What makes it hard for a buyer to answer those 4 categories of questions that I just talked about? So what I've seen at African Cocoa Marketplace at ACM are kind of 4 common problems. One is a visibility gap. The buyer doesn't know that the seller exists. There's tremendous sellers out there doing really, really great work in cocoa, ready to trade, but the buyer, they're not visible to the buyer. The buyer can't see them. So obviously that's a major point of friction. A related visibility gap is when a buyer can't compare one seller to another. So they maybe know that they exist, but they can't do that comparison to see how their sourcing risk plays out across multiple sellers. This is a really big one, and it's one we work really hard to fill this gap at ACM, but the evidence gap. So the seller's making some claims about their cocoa, but maybe those claims aren't documented very well. There's no evidence to back them up, or maybe that evidence is not organized in a way that it's easy to share with the buyer. So this creates a gap. There's often a confidence gap, and this is when the buyer cannot explain internally in their business why a new seller would be a manageable risk. And, every sourcing engagement is a risk, but somebody on the buyer sourcing team will need to explain within their business why this seller over here is less of a risk than this seller over here. And if it's difficult for the person on the sourcing team to do that, then maybe there creates a confidence gap internally within the buyer's business. And then finally, trade friction. Maybe the buyer and seller have already been introduced. Maybe they know each other, but that pathway to sending samples for the buyer to evaluate, to sign contracts, to shipping the cocoa, maybe that's unclear. The problem that I've seen is not really so much capability to fill these gaps, but from ACM's perspective, it's what we talk about as unstructured visibility. And what do I mean by that? So I mean that a seller may be legitimate. They may have everything they say they have. They may be commercially interesting to a buyer, but if their evidence body is kind of scattered around, or they can't support every claim, or they don't have certain pieces of evidence, then the buyer can't act certainly quickly. If you're in the audience as an advisor or a support program, I think this is where market readiness support can become very concrete, helping to seller organizations to organize their documents, clarify their offer, improve their evidence base, and really prepare for questions from the buyer. At ACM, I would say our ultimate goal is to make this kind of visibility very centralized. We are creating a one-stop shop so that sellers don't have to manage repeated requests for the same information over and over from different buyers or partners. And of course, so that buyers can find the information they need in a way that's structured, but also comparable. So they can say, oh, this is what purchasing would look like from maybe this cooperative in Ghana, and this is what it would look like from this private operation in Cameroon. I'm just making up examples, but ACM structures the information in such a way that buyers can compare apples to apples around price, around operational capacity, regulatory readiness, things like this. They're typical questions. So how do we do that? I would say our core concept is pretty simple. Search, evaluate, and engage. And by engage, I mean trade. So let's start with search. So at ACM, the pathway to identifying a seller, for a buyer to identify a seller, know that they exist, and then trade with them, really starts with our online marketplace. So buyers subscribe to the marketplace, and once they're subscribed, they can search for sellers according to the criteria that you see here on the screen. Obviously, very important to be able to search by country. And what you see here is what's currently on our marketplace. So we've got 4 countries currently active, various cocoa products. So this is all live on the marketplace now. So buyers can search by country. They can kind of zoom back a little bit if they want to and search by Africa region. Of course, they can search by the product they're looking for, how much volume they need, and any third-party certifications that they might need for their sourcing. After this, we move to evaluate. Now they've searched. Now it's time to evaluate. And the buyer's first moment, their first chance to evaluate the seller really starts on the marketplace itself through their seller profile. So imagine you're a buyer, you've searched the marketplace, maybe you've ticked Liberia cocoa beans, 100 metric tons. The marketplace has returned search results for all of the sellers who match those criteria. And then you can click on one that's interesting to you, and that will take you through to their seller profile. So this is what the seller profiles look like on our marketplace. It's really like their first triage tool. Like, is this something we want to take further, or is this something that we want to maybe put to the side for now? A buyer can't spend time with every single seller in the world. So this profile helps them see really at a glance, does this seller match our needs for sourcing? It answers some of the practical questions. How much is the trade capacity of the seller? When do they harvest it? What kind of fermentation and drying methods do they use? What Incoterm can I expect for an international trade? It gives the buyer some practical context for deciding, do I want to see more about this seller? Do I want to invest more in due diligence? This is what I mean when I say ACM helps buyers discover African cocoa sellers in a structured way. We provide the same information. The profile looks the same for everybody, so that buyers can compare really easily. Once the buyer has found 1 or 2 or 3 sellers maybe on our marketplace that they're interested in exploring further, they can move to our flagship product, which is our verification report, the ACM verification report. I will say, our goal is not to eliminate risk, because that would be impossible. The goal is to show what we know about a seller, what's evidenced by that seller, and where the gaps still remain. So the verification report is organized around what buyers usually need to know about sellers. This is the table of contents of the report. The sample report is available on our website. It's based on a fictional seller, so you can download it, look at it, see what the report looks like. But you can see here that it covers the seller's business operations, their traceability offering, operational capacity, some ESG systems, of course, some risk flags. And for European buyers especially, I think it's really useful to know not only what claims the seller makes about their operation, but what evidence exists behind those claims, and maybe where they need to do some further due diligence. So I'll show you a page from this report. This is my favorite page. This is one of the pages on operational capacity. And what you can see here is that we've made it visually really easy to understand the operational maturity, maybe, or scale of the seller's business operation. So for example, if they have 3 motorbikes to go around to cocoa communities that they own and use, then we put 3 pictures of motorbikes. You know, if they have a tricycle or 2, we put the number of tricycles that they have. Same with post-harvest or even procurement, buying equipment, any cocoa related assets that the seller has, we document here in visual form so that in just a moment, the buyer can tell at a glance where this seller is in terms of their operational capacity. So, of course, if the buyer is happy with what they see in our verification report, maybe they're going to be ready to move to the 3rd stage, which is engagement. And ACM has a number of optional products and services that we offer to support those next steps towards a more serious trade conversation, and of course, ultimately to the trade itself. So if you are a seller, what can you do to prepare yourself for this kind of engagement? Make sure your documents are organized. This is really step 1 for ACM onboarding. We ask for quite a bit of documentation, so make sure your registrations, your licenses, if you've got an export license, all of that is in one place and you're able to share it. Make sure you know what offer you're making. How much cocoa are you going to sell? When? Do you have a minimum order? What price expectations do you have? Make sure you're really clear on your commercial offer before you go into any conversation. If you have traceability capacity, maybe you've geo-mapped your farms, maybe you've got farmer lists or purchasing records, make sure that those are organized well and you're ready to share them if you're asked to. Same for your quality and logistics operations. If you have moisture meters and you're measuring moisture content, make sure you're recording it. If you have specific fermentation or drying practices, make sure those are documented somewhere and that you've got results of any tests you're doing, cut tests, visual tests. Same with your storage, that's a big one. So make sure all of this is really clear and ready to share. And, you know, certainly not least of this list, who is responsible for communicating with the buyer? What language do they use? How do they communicate? What's your availability? So these are the kinds of things you can do to get ready. I think sellers can't control anything about what the buyers want, but you can control how easily a buyer can evaluate you. So I really encourage you to take those really practical steps that I just went over in preparation. So just to say a few words about ACM, where are we now? Where are we headed? Our seller pipeline, most of the sellers in our network are in Sierra Leone and Liberia, but we do span 9 African cocoa producing countries. One day we hope to have all the cocoa producing countries in Africa. Most of those are in the very early pipeline stages. We are focusing the most now on verification. We'd rather know a lot more about a few sellers than a little bit about, 200 of them, especially for marketplace onboarding. So that's where we're focusing right now. And while we mainly have cocoa and beans and butter, liquor, butter powder on the marketplace, we are definitely moving towards other cocoa derivatives. African craft chocolate will be available on our marketplace soon, and in the future, adjacent crops, including coffee, cashew, etc. So to wrap up, what does this mean for you? For sellers, just do your best to take the buyer's perspective, know what they're going to ask you or what they're likely to ask you. That tells you what to prepare for a trade. For buyers, I think ACM's really structured visibility can help you widen your sourcing options. We can't pretend that risk just disappears, but we can certainly help mitigate procurement risk. And for ecosystem partners like ABF, this overview can maybe help you create a concrete agenda for training and support. So at ACM, we say transparency creates trust and trust creates trade. So I thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to your questions when we get to the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristy. Thanks very much. I think there were some really interesting points. I think most of them was quite new to many people here in our audience, and I still have a question or even two in mind, but I will keep it as it is for the moment, because we give Simran now the possibility to start his presentation, and then we will bundle and bring all questions in later on. There are already one question in the chat, and we will definitely come back to you later, Kristy. First of all, thanks very much. And I think this was a very focused and interesting presentation. Thank you. Simran, please, now the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Can people see my presentation? Yep, great, thanks. Firstly, a big thank you to GIZ, both for being able to participate in the ABF program, but also for this opportunity to share our experience. Those of you who don't know Kristy, I've had the pleasure of knowing her for, I think, 10 plus years now. And I think that Kristy did not do a good enough job of explaining her expertise in the cocoa sector. Kristy literally wrote the book titled Cocoa, a copy of which is sitting on my bookshelf here in the office, and I would highly recommend all of you to read it. There's not many people in the world who know as much about the cocoa sector as Kristy, so an honor to share the digital podium with her. For those of you who don't know us, which I imagine is all of you or most of you, we are an operation in Tanzania where we work on producing high quality cocoa to sell to the premium chocolate market. I appreciate the opportunity to being able to present, but I also will caveat it that we are a very small company. Amongst the specialty niche sector of the market, we are well represented. We're lucky to have some excellent customers, but in terms of global production, Tanzania on a whole is a drop in the global cocoa bucket, and we are a very small company as well within Tanzania. So, but I appreciate being given the opportunity to share our story a little bit. I think we've got a decent reputation in the premium market, so I'll try to share a little bit of my experience on that. So, so a little bit of background is we've been around for over 10 years. Our focus is on producing high quality cocoa, selling it at a high price to customers that care about quality, and ensuring that we're then able to pay the highest prices that we can to the farmers that we work with. In Tanzania, cocoa is a smallholder crop. Our average farm size is less than a hectare, or less than 3/4 of a hectare, at least in the part of Tanzania that we work in. We work by buying wet cocoa from farmers and fermenting and drying it ourselves. We do a mix of agronomy training, following our own internal SOPs on ensuring that we're able to produce a high quality. We're a very data heavy organization, and that helps drive our operations. And yeah, we're proud of what we've been able to accomplish over the years, both with regards to payments to farmers and in terms of the formal jobs that we've created in a rural part of the country, and of course the reputation that we've built in the global cocoa market. We're pleased to have visitors chocolate makers come visit us over the years. We were privileged enough to have Kristy come out pre-COVID at one point as well, which was great. Yeah, we've been awarded the Cocoa of Excellence several times. We different categories. We were the first ones in East Africa to ever win. We've got a great customer base around the world, people who buy a couple of kilos up to people who buy a couple of containers. So yeah. When we started our first year, we did about 25 tons, which we exported to the US. Over the years, we've sort of just grown bit by bit, steadily, so that last year we did about 420 tons, about a third to the US, a third to the EU, and a third to the rest of the world. How do we do this? Like I mentioned, we source directly from farmers, premium pricing, control the processing, and ensure that we have long-term relationships with the customers that we work with. I think an important thing to say is that quality is important. The story can help, whether it's conservation, whether it's farm empowerment, whether it's something totally different, but that only matters once your quality is there. A chocolate maker, you can have the best story in the world, but if your cocoa tastes bad, no one's going to buy it. And so from our point of view, I think focusing on the quality is the predominant thing that people need to start with. Yeah. These are just an example of we supply predominantly the bean to bar market. So here you got some examples of some customers of ours around the world, both within Europe, the US, Japan, Australia, and yeah. So these are the kinds of people that we sell to, companies that will put the origin on the bar, will not only put Tanzania on the bar, but often put Kokoa Kamili or the village that we work in or the national parks that we're close to, people who really care about telling the origin of their product. We're not huge multinationals that blend the cocoa with cocoa from 50 other origins and produce a mass market product. We provide a high quality cocoa for use in the premium market space. Since the question was, the title of the topic was about Africa versus Latin America, I wanted to go down that rabbit hole a little bit. When we started, most of the single origin bars that we were seeing out there were focused on Latin America and the Caribbean, because that's where people had a perception, rightfully, wrongly, I think wrongly, but that's where you got quality. Africa was where you went for scale, where you go for bulk, large volume, mixed, if not just bad quality, ethically dubious, non-transparent cocoa, which is a totally unfair characterization. And so that's why we wanted to start a company that shows that there's a huge breadth of quality, flavor, genetics, etc. within Africa. Africa has 54 countries. I would imagine at least 30 of them are growing cocoa. So Ghana is closer to Spain than it is to Tanzania. Why are we being lumped in one basket? And so I think that these days that perception has started to change, but we're still not there yet. People still consider Africa as where you go for predominantly low quality, bulk, cheap cocoa. I think that I think people are starting to change, but we're not fully there yet. I'd say what wins in the premium market space is that you really just have to make it easy for the customer. If it's not easy, like anything in the world, people want an easy option usually. I think one of the things is flavor profile that fills a gap. We definitely had lean into our flavor being unique, being special. Our flavor is quite different from the chocolatey notes of a lot of West African beans. Our flavor is more fruity, red fruit, dried fruit, more like some from Trinidad and so on. And I think that was great in the early stages of our operations because it created sort of a niche and a carve-out for us to differentiate us. We also have had people say they would buy more of us if we were able to produce a more chocolatey based bean. So I think it shows that people are really looking for something specific for their own product. I think just having consistency is key. There's no point sending a sample today and then in next year's harvest is completely different, or even your production in a couple of months is completely different. Like if you're not able to produce a consistent quality bean, then I think that people aren't going to be interested. This is like it may seem like a small thing, but representative samples are just so important. You know, no one wants to get a sample and then that's cherry picked. You know, there's no point producing the best of your best sample and sending that out. You might do that initially to get a customer sort of interested, but when it's getting down to the actual sale, if your sample isn't going to be the same as what shows up when the customer gets their container, I mean, maybe you'll have made a sale one time, but you know, you won't have that. That'll be a one-time sale, and one-time sales are not the goal for anyone. You know, our first container was sold to the US in 2013, and that customer is still a customer of ours today. There's no point. It can be frustrating if something goes wrong. Your beans get moldy, your beans get infested. You don't have the quality that you thought you were going to have, and so you still need the money, you need the cash flow, and you want to sell them to someone who's offered you a good price. But like, there's no point in doing it one time. Like, it really doesn't help anyone. I think, as Kristy said, as we all know, compliance is key for Europe these days. EUDR, organic, any other certification. Heavy metal content is also important, and being able to show that you have that data or that you can get that data is key. Okay, look, we hope to be EUDR compliant in 2 or 3 years from now, or you know, we can't send you a heavy metals test. You know, like you got to make it as easy as possible for people. Unfortunately, you know, the EUDR compliance for a lot of people is a pain point, is tough. So I feel for smaller operations that aren't able to comply with that. We all know that the racket of certification as well, but it's important. I think just like fast response times, transparent communication is so important. This is also such a basic thing, but no one's going to take you seriously if you email from a Yahoo or Gmail email account. Like, just get a company email account. It's so easy. And it's like, respond to emails on time, share your WhatsApp number, and like, don't pester people, but be responsive. If someone emails you, like, we have a policy that no matter the customer type, we try to respond to every email within every incoming sales email within 24 hours. It takes a minute. You know, you can respond to an email, even if you say, look, we're currently up country and connection is bad, we'll do our best to get back to you within the next day or two, or like just to ping out a quick email, I think goes such a long way. Packaging, documentation, compliance is a big thing. People want to know that you're going to be able to pack beans as they want them. You know, some people don't want PP bags, they want jute bags. They want to know that you have migration testing for your jute bags, or your supplier does. They want to know that they may want Grain Pros or Grain Pro equivalents. They want to know that you can provide them, that you have access to them. They may want evidence of farmer impact and sustainability. And it's incredibly annoying that every chocolate maker, every customer has their own reporting framework, has their own questions. So for us, we have tons of data available for chocolate makers, but to pass it out as each individual wants it is very time consuming. But we do it because if it's important to our customer, it's something that we have to do. Just, you know, basic customer service. Sorry. I think it's also important to think about what kind of customer you're talking to. I sort of try to block them into like 3 different types, and maybe this is an unfair categorization or not, but you know, you've got the big traders, the guys who want big volumes, who are often doing back-to-back deals, are super price conscious. They're looking for a deal. A deal today might not mean that they're going to be a customer for life. It can be fairly opportunistic. You've also, and I'll skip and I'll go to the chocolate maker, which is the end user. And the end user, depending on the type of end user, might want a pallet. They might want 2 containers. And it's a tough one to fill because it's the dream. You know, you walk around a show and you see 30 chocolate makers from around Europe, and you say, great, cool, you know, like you chat, you explain what you do, and you say, how much cocoa are you buying a year? And they say, we're buying 3 tons a year. You're like, okay, well, that it's a tough one sometimes. And that's why for us, what's worked out really well for us is working with some of these specialty distributors in Europe and the US. Like, our business would not have survived if it weren't for these guys being in place. And sometimes people will say, oh, but these guys you're sacrificing margin by working with them. But really, they're the ones who are more willing to take a risk. They are more, it's easier for them to serve smaller customers. And they typically have access to better financing than you're going to have. So they can pay you quicker. They might be more price conscious than a chocolate maker because they're going to put their margin on. They are a middleman. But for us, it's a 100% a net positive. And I'm talking about companies like Crafting Markets, Don Hauer, Silver Cacao, Cacao Latitudes, Nahu, Cocoa Team, businesses like that who really do play for us a very key role. In the US, Meridian Cacao, Cacao Latitudes as well, Uncommon Cacao, of course. The risks that these guys all worry about are the financial risks. If I'm paying for something FOB, what's going to show up? Like if it opens up, am I going to get, you know, I've got stories of friends who open containers and instead of a full container, there's 3 pallets, you know, or other friends who've opened containers of beans and it's 10% rocks in their beans, or the beans are moldy. Or they get the beans and then they send them to a lab. They're supposed to be organic and they send them to a lab and they come back riddled with pesticides. So these are all risks. These are real risks that people face and that people have had to deal with in the past. And that's why they're there. And so it just reiterates my point of you want to make it as easy as possible. Some of the challenges this means for those of us on the ground is that more than anything, it's financial, right? Like we don't have access to, I don't know about the rest of the people attending, but for us, for example, we don't have a cheap financing option. Our debt is very expensive. And so that means that if we FOB, so the ship sails, we get issued the bill of lading, we courier the bill of lading to the customer. They then have 7 to 30 days to pay us. And that's typically how it works. But for a new origin, a lot of the time, and if you really want to get your beans into the European market and you're able to comply, you're able to do all of these things, the best way to do it is to go to a distributor and say, look, you can pay me on consignment. You know, I will help you to sell these beans, and as you sell them, you can pay me. But that means that you have to have access to, you have to be able to eat, like not having access to that money for as long as it takes to get this. The other thing is that, like, you know, sending samples, multiple samples is expensive and takes time. And if I have to send a pre-ship sample, there was a situation last year where we sent a pre-ship sample to a customer and they wanted to approve the pre-ship sample. And it was right when the war broke out in Iran. And so it was this year then. And then the sample took, 2.5 weeks to get to them instead of the typical 1 week. And then they took a really long time to evaluate the sample. And in the meantime, I'm paying 18% debt on that money that I borrowed to buy that cocoa. And so you just have to be able to suck it up and have the financial ability to eat that cost, because people can take a long time to make a decision. And it's unfortunate, so we spend thousands of dollars in courier charges every year. If I'm traveling, I take a suitcase of samples with me so that I can send them out from wherever I go and save on that. Right now we have to get a phytosanitary certificate for each 1 kilo sample we send, and that costs us $85 a pop. So it unfortunately is expensive and it's a challenge. that's why one of the reasons that I think long-term relationships are just so key, that we're so lucky that we have great partners in Europe and the US that now, after many years, a lot of them work with us. Like when we're cash flow strapped, they might be able to give us a little bit of forward financing at the end of our season. The last couple of shipments, we might be able to work with them to do the opposite. When they're in a cash crunch and it's the end of our season and we've got some time, we can say, look, we can give you an extra 30 days on payment terms and all of that stuff. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it on my side. I hope I've been helpful. I worry that I haven't, but if please send me an email or ping me on a WhatsApp if you've got any further questions that we aren't able to cover in the question time here. But yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Simran, and thank you once again, Kristy. We are really privileged to have two really cocoa experts here today. And Simran, your presentation, really, you gave so many insights into your day-to-day business. Actually, thanks for that. And actually, I really didn't know that. I have known that Kristy is a cocoa expert, but I didn't know that Kristy is the cocoa expert. So yeah, thanks once again to both of you. And well, we still have 30 minutes left, ladies and gentlemen. Now it's your turn, and the speakers will still stay with us, of course. Please just think about questions, and you can also later on please open your microphone or your camera and please raise your hand, your virtual hand, if you want to ask them anything. There was 2 questions in the chat so far. Maybe the first, it's sent by Guy, and maybe this was to Kristy, but I think both of you feel free to take it. Is it possible for a SME accompanying Cocoa Cooperative to register as direct seller to European Union buyer? Till now, we are connected to big buyers as Olam in Cameroon. Kristy, do you want to take this question, or Simran?
Yeah, thank you. And Simran, please jump in here too. First of all, before I answer the question, I want to say thank you so much for both of your kind words about my cocoa experience. But I want to say the feeling is absolutely mutual. Simran, I learned so much when I visited Kokoa Kamili, and your ability to manage data and from purchased through post-harvest is unparalleled, and I continually reference your model in my mind when I'm thinking about ACM and everything else. So thank you for the opportunity to learn from you as well. It was tremendous when I visited. So I think my answer to the question, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that you would need an export license, essentially, and that can look different in each different country. But once you're registered as an exporter, I don't know that there would be anything to stop you from making a direct sale to an EU buyer. But again, it will depend a lot on the regulatory context that you're working in. What does it take to acquire an export license? And certainly what type of buyer you would be working with in the end, and do they have the capability to structure a trade directly with you? That would be my answer. I would love to hear from Stefan and Simran as well, if you have other thoughts on that.
Simran?
Sorry, my computer is lagging.
Yeah, but no.
I don't have much insight, to be honest. I don't know about the regulatory environment. On the EU side, if you've got the data and you've got a customer, there shouldn't be any issue. But I can't speak to the regulatory side on it's Cameroon, was it?
Yeah.
No, that part I'm not able to provide any insight to, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Me neither, to be honest. But Guy, if you still want, you can also come in directly later on and even explain your question a little bit more, or you can of course contact Kristy or Simran directly later after this chat. Before we come, there's one more question by Veronica, Adele, and also Rita. Please, Lisa has raised her hand. Lisa, just come in and open your mic and your camera, please, and then feel free to ask your question yourself, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the very wholesome presentation also. So my first question was regarding the book, if we could have the title, because I didn't grasp that directly. And also, regarding the cocoa farmers and so on, how much do you care about the, let's say, certification, sustainability frameworks, and also regarding the home country's regulation? How do you adapt to that? I hope the question was easy to grasp. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Lisa. So Kristy has already written the title of her book in the chat, which is pretty simple, Cocoa. But I think all the relevant information you find there. And then the second part of your question, Lisa, please, one of the two speakers, just feel free to take over this question.
I can speak a little bit to the certifications. For us, organic certification was very important to get. You know, when we started, a lot of our potential customers were organic certified, and even though we explained, look, our farmers that we work with are growing in sort of organic by default conditions, a lot of customers said, look, yeah, we get it, man, but we sell to Whole Foods, and Whole Foods says certified organic, or they running their own organic certified facilities, and so they're only able to take organic inputs. And so for us, it was a important market access certification for us to get. In terms of the sustainability aspect, if it's not sustainable for a farmer to be growing cocoa, then there's no cocoa company to be had. You know, like if you know, we encourage our farmers to say, look, if you can make more money by doing something else, and that's sort of your goal and your target, then we shouldn't be doing this, and you shouldn't be doing it. So when I think about sustainability, I think about it as sustainability as a business, both for ourselves and for farmers, rather than necessarily like the environmental aspect, which is of course also important. But for me, sustainability means not just the environmental, but it means that every player in the value chain has to be sustainable for each of them as well. I hope that answers your question. If not, say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simran. All right, thank you. And Lisa, I hope this was okay for you. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Then let's come to one of the questions written in the chat. Maybe Simran and Kristy, let's start with a question written by our colleague Veronica. And she's writing, from your perspective, how do you see the European agricultural and commodity markets evolving over the next 2 to 3 years? What key priorities should African producers and exporters focus on to remain competitive? Finally, how important for your relationship with smallholders in ensuring long-term supply chain success? Basically, 3 questions. Maybe we start with you, Kristy, if you want to take one or two of these questions, please?
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. These are really, really good questions. I think it's really hard to predict, obviously, how commodity markets will evolve. I think one of the things we have to be really mindful of always is the market fundamentals. Where is supply and where is demand? And we have seen such fluctuations over the past few years on both sides. I think we're all aware at this point where demand had been pretty inelastic for chocolate, meaning that demand for chocolate stayed pretty consistent no matter what the price was doing. That has started to change for the first time since I've been studying this industry. And so I think keeping an eye on where demand is going is always a smart thing to do, but also supply. I was reading recently that there's a high probability of moving into a pretty strong El Nino cycle again before the end of this year, which means potentially more, the El Nino cycle is the hot, dry cycle. And if that brings us back to drought conditions, if it puts some constraints around supply again, especially in West Africa, as El Nino cycles pretty much always do, then we're looking at another scenario really potentially of constrained supply. And so I think the best thing any player in this market can do is make sure they keep their finger on, the pulse of the market fundamentals and know where you're positioned within that. As if you're a buyer, what is your customer demand looking like? If you're a seller, what is your particular area looking like in terms of productivity? And of course, it's not just weather, it's not just climate, it's disease vectors, it's liquidity. How much cash is in your system right now? Simran made some really, really good points before about, the financing of trade. And if you're wanting to move cocoa, you need cash. And there's just no way around that. So I think keeping an eye on what the fundamentals are doing. I'll just skip to the third question very briefly. I think at ACM, at African Cocoa Marketplace, we look at the aggregator scale. That's where we operate and do business. So cooperatives, even exporters, private organizations that aggregate cocoa and move it downstream. But there's not a customer that I work with that isn't interested in the farmers. And so I think relationships between the seller organization and the smallholders that contribute to that organization is absolutely paramount. It's really difficult to describe impact. It's impossible to describe impact if you don't know who the farmers are that you're working with and how you're treating them and how what benefits you're bringing to them. So I think relationships with smallholders are very, very rightly so important no matter where you work in the supply chain.
Thank you very much, Kristy. Simran, do you want to add something? Yeah, please. Then feel free.
I think EUDR is going to be a bit of a game changer. I think there will start to be sort of two pricings, for EUDR compliant cocoa and non-compliant cocoa, and I think Africa is not as well positioned to be compliant as Latin America is, unfortunately, and I worry about that. The good thing is that it's impossible to talk about cocoa and chocolate without Africa. So I hope. I don't know. EUDR has been a disaster. The rollout of it has been a total mess and is a total train wreck. And so it'll just get. I imagine it'll just continue to get watered down. You can't make chocolate without Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana at the level that Europe consumes chocolate. So the idea that Anyway, let's see what happens. I think it'll be messy. But I've also. The last couple of years have been such a wild ride in cocoa that the last 2 or 3 years in particular that I've given up trying to trying to foresee what's going to happen. You know, the spike and the collapse has been, yeah. I think that something that we are able to capitalize on here is that on the continent is that heavy metal stuff, we're much better at heavy metal content than Latin America, so that's a competitive advantage for us. I think that some of the changes on organic regulations from Brussels have also been a bit of a mess, and it's going to be harder for some African groups to comply with. But I hope not. And yeah, the smallholder part, I think I answered that, my response to Lisa's question, or my thoughts on it.
Thank you, Simran. We have still 2 questions here in the chat, and then Lisa will also come again. Definitely. But let's first take the question of our MGF Kokoa project in Kenya from Adele. Kristy, I'm curious if any other sellers of cocoa ingredients such as cocoa butter, powder, and cocoa mass have any preferred platforms and or market references do you typically use to benchmark your price, especially as our market has been so volatile?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think volatility is the name of the game, right? These days, everything is just so unpredictable. And some of the earlier patterns, as I mentioned before, are not repeating nowadays. So an important thing to note, and I didn't say this earlier, but ACM doesn't set prices. We are a discovery partner, so we support buyers to find sellers, and we support sellers to manage their relationships with buyers. We can give support through the price negotiation process to both sides if that's required, but we don't set any prices at all. I can speak more generally. So, for example, we don't have fixed price floors or premiums. We're not a certification, so we don't act in that way. I can speak more generally to what I've seen with processors across Africa that I work with the semi-finished products, the butter, the powder, and the mass. And I think I haven't seen any preferred platforms really, and the market references are so specific to that geographies, logistics, and supply chain and customer base. So it's been very interesting for me to see where you have markets, especially in West Africa, where there's more established logistics and market pathways at scale. Then you have a different kind of set of opportunities around price negotiation. What I've seen in some of the smaller markets or the emerging markets is even sometimes like basing prices on what your competitors are doing, or basically selling whatever product moves fastest depending on where your customers are and where demand is. And that's really in cases where the logistics and the customer relationships are not maybe as established as they are in other parts of Africa. I really appreciated, Simran, what you said before, that like Africa normally, people will often lump everything together, and the cocoa markets are so diverse. The processing capabilities are so diverse. The cocoa flavors, qualities, volumes are very specific to each market. So I haven't seen anything that I could say works across the board. It's really about market specificity. So I know that's not probably a wonderful answer to your question, but it's the truth based on what I've seen.
All right, thank you very much, Kristy. And before we come to Rita Weidinger's questions, let's bring in Lisa once again. Lisa, please just open your camera and your mic, and then feel free to ask whatever you want to.
Okay, thank you again. So I'm currently writing my master thesis on the subject of cocoa and smallholder farmers regarding like Ivory Coast. And generally, I wanted to ask if, for example, if the home country has a new regulation or a specific policy, does this affect your work? And if yes, how does it affect your work? Or do you maybe have examples? Thank you.
I can speak to the seller side. I'd love to hear from Simran on the buyer side about what buyer markets look like in that way, if that makes sense for you.
Sorry, I don't like do the buyers care about the regulatory environment in the country of origin? Is that the question?
Yeah, basically also if
I
they
mean,
care, if it how it influences their proceedings maybe.
I mean, in my case, like, you know, the regulatory environment is one that I just have to comply with. You know, you can't operate in a country and not follow the laws of the country. And so if the regulation says X, Y, Z, then I have to do X, Y, Z. In regards to the buyers, I know that I mean, Kristy can speak better to this than I can, but I know that I've come across operations in West Africa that would like to do stuff, for example, like similar to what we do, but because you have Cocoa Board or centralized purchasing operations and selling operations, it makes it harder to be a little bit innovative. And I understand that there's other rationale from the governments on putting those policies in place. And I'm not sort of putting them down. I'm just saying, like, I know that people have had challenges when there are top-down regulations on. It can impact innovation, of course, but they are there for reasons often, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And I think, you know, for me, it's like a mixture of perception and then reality. So I think at ACM and in my own sort of research background, I worked in highly regulated markets like Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, and then also in the markets where there is not a strong regulator, Sierra Leone, Liberia. Of course, there are marketing boards in these countries, but they don't have the scope or scale or historical foundation that you see in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. And so I think there are a lot of perception.
Oh, now Kristy was kicked out. Now she's coming in. Wait one minute, please. He's just re-asking for access, which was already granted. Kristy,
I got kicked out.
You got kicked out, yeah, but now you are back.
I'm back. It was a quick return. Yeah, I think, you know, there are a lot of perceptions about the regulated markets and versus the unregulated markets, and then there are the realities. And I think, you know, look, there are advantages and disadvantages from a trade perspective to having a lot of, you know, regulation, a comprehensive regulatory structure, like you see, for example, in Ghana. There are quality control mechanisms. There's institutional knowledge that's been shared for, you know, 100 years. There's generational kind of, you know, interaction with a kind of regulator that's really present on the ground, and that can do a lot of really good things in terms of managing the trade and making certain logistics a bit easier, making trade sometimes clearer, sometimes less. But I think then if you look at the markets where you don't have these kind of comprehensive regulatory structures, like Simran said, you can have a little bit more flexibility, especially around value addition and innovation. When I've worked in the maybe less regulated markets, I've seen a lot more kind of farm to, not necessarily chocolate, although I've seen that too, certainly farm to intermediate products where you can have more vertical integration and you have more flexibility for adding value in country. And so again, I think there's not one specific story that I think applies to the entirety of, cocoa producing markets in Africa. And for me, it really, who I'm talking to really matters, because they'll have entered that story through a particular market or a particular purchasing relationship or sourcing priority that really shapes how they see it. So I think the short answer is yes, definitely regulation can shape what buyers and sellers can do or think. But again, it's very specific, and there's no one narrative that I think covers even a region within Africa, never mind the whole continent. There's quite a bit of specificity.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. We still come to Rita's question, of course, but let's first take Fadel's question from Côte d'Ivoire. How are digital platforms and marketing transparency changing the way buyers choose sellers? Very simple, but very good question. Maybe this is especially for you, Kristy, of course.
Because ACM is a digital platform, obviously I've thought about this a lot, and I would say I'm not sure how it's changing things yet. I mean, we're a startup still, we're a very young company still, and what I've seen over the years, in this industry, are that there have been a number of attempts to create digital platforms or marketing kind of transparency efforts to happen online. And I would say that we don't have a large scale solution yet. So my honest answer is I'm not sure how it will change the way buyers choose sellers. What I always say, and this I think will be true forever, regardless of digital, interactions or marketplaces online, cocoa is a relationship business. That is a truth that will always, has been true for as long as I've been in this industry, and I think will carry on. If if you have a way to build a relationship and communicate, where your entry point is, whether it's a digital marketplace or someone you met when you visited an origin, or someone, a buyer that you interact with through a large trading company, or through one of the specialty companies that Simran was describing before, I think it's really the relationship that comes out of it that matters most of all. I think there are so many entry points for buyers and sellers to connect with each other. Our digital marketplace is one effort to make that easier, but I couldn't say whether it's a solution that will change the way we do business in cocoa. I think we can help build some relationships, is what I would say. I would love to hear, Simran, what your thoughts are on that, because I know Kokoa Kamili has just been so really great at forging pathways for specialty cocoa from Africa, and at a time when that didn't really happen. You were pioneers in that way.
Yeah,
please.
In terms of I think it's sort of like it's a little bit of a must-have in these days. I think people, if you're trying to sell into the specialty market, it's a minimum bar that you have to have some level of market transparency.
All right, we are coming close to an end, because now let me just have one last question, that one from Rita, which is in particular interesting to us from ABF. First, the question Rita is asking, under which conditions would it make sense for a country to go for an overall fine flavor focus? For example, Sierra Leone. And this question is in particular interesting for us as ABF, as Agri-Business Facility for Africa, because at the end of this year, we are planning a buyer's mission. We want to go with German chocolate company, with the buyers, to Sierra Leone to meet the producers, the cooperatives, and we try then to create business-to-business linkages. And therefore, this question, which Rita has posed, is also in particular interesting to us. Please.
I don't see why a country as a whole would try to make a fine flavored focus. It's like, is there buyer demand for it? Like yeah. I think there's something to be said for like getting countries, you know, I'm part of the ICCO Fine Flavor Panel Committee, and we evaluate country submissions on requesting for a percentage of their exports to be regarded as fine flavor. And I think that is beneficial to the countries, not necessarily the market, but more as a point of pride and a point of sort of showing that there is quality and that there is stuff that should be focused on. I don't think that a country as a whole needs to decide to focus, like we need to focus 100% on being a fine flavor origin or not. I think that's the right answer from my side. Yeah.
All right. Then it's 6:28. First, I have still 2 minutes for the closing remarks because I want to use this for some advices and some further recommendations. First of all, yes, we will share the presentations with you. Yes, we will do. Just give us a little bit time, maybe tomorrow or Monday, but we will do. Then, please see in the chat there is our webpage, and in the download sector, you find our report from the International Sweets Fair in Cologne, which was Simon already mentioning in the beginning. This is in the first title, you find the report, and Simran was also part of this group, and there were many more people who came there to Cologne. So have a look at this. And then I would like to tell you, we have also an e-learning course on export compliance and export to the European Union. We have the Atingi Agri-Biz e-Academy, and you find the link over here. And it's really worth to have a look at it and to register. And yes, this I can also recommend to all our participants. All right, now I am going to stop the record very soon. And let me thank you once again, Simran and Kristy, for your presentation. I think you really gave great insights into the cocoa business, the cocoa sector, and I am more than happy that we were asking you, both of you, and that this also led to such a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much, and I'm going to stop the recording now. And yeah, thank you